Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to another Pallavi Market Research video. Today, I'm going to be discussing how to evaluate performance. Why are we discussing performance evaluation? Well, we're more going to discover the correct measurements, right? What are the correct measures of value, right? Because if you're able to measure the right things, then you're actually able to trust your evaluation of performance if you know the right things to look at are, both for analyzing a business, right? And for analyzing your own business or building your own business to optimize for certain things. I want to start off with discussing a little bit of an example though, because in this type of discussion, I want you guys to really think much bigger about your own personal goals, your own personal measures of success. Because measuring and defining your own version of success is one of the most important things you can do in life. The more specific, the more nuanced your defined definition of success is, the better you're going to be doing. Okay. And this is like we can use an example like, I don't know, Tom Brady, right? So Tom Brady is this type of guy who went out there and defined his own unique, nuanced definition for what a successful quarterback looks like, right? He, when you listen to him talk, he's constantly talking about the intangibles, the intangibles. I have the intangibles, right? And what is an intangible? It's just something that's really hard to measure, right? That is helpful as fuck. Okay. So if you're 6'6", 320 pounds, and you can run a sub 540, we can measure those things and we know you're useful to our football team, right? But if he has this like locker room, he calls everyone babe, kind of thing, like he's a cool cat, right? And he's, very intense, can read the field, is always watching tape, right? All these things that are really hard to quantify, especially because watching like hours of watching tape is like one way of measuring it, but then it's like, how does that actually manifest itself on the field is another way, and you can't really measure that. So Tom Brady, especially if you contrast him to a person like Peyton Manning, right? Peyton Manning is this guy who was literally raised by a quarterback, right? And he was like, okay, well, if you throw the spiral, blah, 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 like he was a guy who was like optimizing for like what a textbook would tell him about being a quarterback, right? He is the guy who's like, I'm just following this rule book, right? I'm just telling whatever the world tells me is the definition of success. I will follow that. Whereas Tom Brady's the opposite. He's like, I know like what I'm playing to my strengths, my own internal inspiration. I'm playing for me to defend my spot, right? To claim my path, right? So it's that kind of energy, and like he's you have to, if you very intentionally define your own definitions of success, then you're going to be able to analyze your own performance a lot better and a lot more honestly, and you're going to get a lot better results. Because so evaluating performance, after that huge intro, is all about actually getting progress. Because if you can evaluate progress, then you actually can create progress and performance. All right. Now, when we all have these like online businesses now, and we all understand kind of how this works, right? So at different parts of your journey of creating impressions, right? There are all these different steps. Like there's like this, this conversion rate, all these things contribute to purchases, right? Brand awareness, consideration, right? All of these steps that you're taking people through to grow your business, right? And at each of one of these places, you have a point of failure, right? And if you can measure which point of failure is, which of these is not helping enough and which of these is helping the most, right? So maybe you would take your email resources and invest more into that and remove your store or PR investments, right? Because playing into your strengths typically works. We could sit here and go through a chart like this, a table like this, right? In a table like this, we would learn how to conceptualize, how to create a very nice mental model for the steps of performance evaluation, right? The thing is, this is a finance channel, so we're going to go back to what these guys who actually know what they're talking about. So the thing I've noticed is when the anecdotes and the data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. Jeff Bezos, okay? There's when this is happening, there's something wrong with the way you're measuring it, right? These are nice frameworks. Measurement is fabulous unless you're busy measuring what's easy to measure as opposed to what's important. So it's very easy to get stuck measuring things that don't actually matter, right? So maybe it doesn't really matter if you don't care about having a sick watch, a $60,000 watch, right? So that you can get that same social credit, right? If you don't care about such a thing, then maybe don't have that in your list of goals. But if you do care about maybe earning that same respect with your peers through different means, like buying a sports car or, taking people on a certain type of vacation, I don't know. There are other ways of gaining that same kind of social credibility, if you will, doing it your own way, right? So you don't have to like tick every box, right? So, but back to finance. Jeff Bezos defines this definition of success. Percentage margins are not one of the things we are seeking to optimize. It's the absolute dollar free cash flow per share that you want to maximize. And if you can do that by lowering margins, we would do that. Okay. So, what is he saying here, guys? He's saying we need to prioritize absolute free cash flow per share while lowering margins. So, what does this mean? So, these are two definitions of free cash flow to equity and free cash flow to the firm. So, free cash flow to equity applies like public companies, right? Publicly traded companies. Whereas free cash flow to firm is like a private company. So, because we're using this Amazon example, we're going to be just defining this one. So, this is basically the cash flow available to the company's equity shareholders after all expenses, capital expenditures, and debt payments have been made. It represents the cash that the company could distribute to shareholders without impacting its operations. This, guys, is the most important measure of a publicly traded company. Okay? It's not really close. If you can't do this, then you can't do much that's helpful to, I don't know, the shareholder, right? So if you want to calculate this, it's operating cash flow minus capital expenditures plus net debt issued times net debt issued minus debt repayments. Okay. Capital expenditures is the key word here. And Amazon was able to achieve all this because Jeff Bezos, when he was making that quote, by the way, okay, he was actually lobbying his shareholders to stick by him through this period of massive capital investment, capital expenditures. What are those? It's the trucks, it's the planes, it's the facilities. If you look at this thing, this is an old Amazon map, right? Showing the amount of square footage he has within each of these dots and dot sizes and what kind of things they are, right? He has millions and millions of square feet of real estate across America only, okay? This guy built a company with a market cap of $1.7 trillion, guys. This business is larger than South Korea and Australia's economy. So this is no joke, right? He, by accident, was able to create a streaming platform on his on his. I don't know why you're talking to Amazon so much, but he has 150 million people on his site every day. So he basically has 150 million Amazon Prime Video subscribers, right? Which is larger than these countries via population. Now, Jeff Bezos successfully built this company optimizing for this measure. And he built a machine with tens of thousands, I don't know, maybe even hundreds of thousands of employees now, right? And he hasn't worked there in like 5 years. I mean, he got like this new girlfriend, right? And was like, I'm a baller now. So I'm going to ball out. And and Amazon's going to make hundreds of billions of dollars every year, and they're going to make more hundreds of billions after I leave. So that's one thing he did. I don't think Elon can say he's done anything like that. Great performance measurements are paradoxical. This is kind of what I was getting at earlier. We want to make more money, but spend less of it. We want to innovate more, but with the same resources, right? This is the paradox of creating leverage, guys. If you are able to create leverage, okay, which is essentially what it means to invest in things that no one can afford, right? So if you own a fleet of planes, if you own a fleet of, you know, processing facilities and vans and all these things, right? You own all this stuff. If you own a legion of infrastructure to move things around in the world, then you have some staying power, right? Especially if your revenue allows you is like able to pay off those debts that are able to make those investments, right? And even more especially if you can tell that story to your shareholders so that they can help your share price maintain certain value so that that can then also be leveraged towards investing in these capital expenditures, which are essentially assets until they're fully paid off. I mean, whatever. So when you're engaged in this process, right, you have to also understand how to attribute credit. Okay. So this is a little bit dry. Most of you are going to probably fall off the video at this point, but being able to attribute credit is its own difficult situation because you are, as someone with goals, benchmarking where you want to be. You're like, okay, if I'm not here by this date, then this is a problem, right? Then there's something going wrong. Now, there's these three effects. Allocation effect, that's basically just how you weight things in a portfolio. If it's 5% gold, it's 2% Bitcoin. It's like, okay, well, I'm making these decisions, right? And so how is the allocation affecting my outcomes? And then there's a selection effect, like what you're actually selecting within those allocations, right? So I guess if you want an allocation within a certain sector, that's more what I should have said that. But you're allocating an industry or a sector of the economy, right? A commodity. Then that would be an allocation. And then selection is like within the allocation, right? And then interaction is like how do those things interact with each other? And then how does it compare to a benchmark, like I was saying earlier, like the S&P 500, if you're a hedge fund, right? That's pretty much if you can't do better than the S&P 500, why would anyone give you their money, right? That is pretty much the only purpose of a hedge fund or private equity fund is to be like, can you get me 5% more on my money? Ideally 6 to 8, better than the S&P 500, then you got this, Hedge funds weren't actually really supposed to do anything better than like 22 to 38% IRR. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but like if you want to actually have a career in hedge funds, you want to be making that every year. You don't want to be the guy who's like swinging for the fences and is coming back raising money every other time it's a giant W or a giant L, right? You have to think long term in building these types of institutions, right? Okay, so that's today's video. Create your own measures of success, guys. Because if you don't, then you're just consuming goals of shit you don't want. And nothing's worse than working hard towards things you don't want. That's weird. Especially what other people want, not what you want. And if you don't know the difference between the things that you want and things that other people want, then hey, you don't know the difference between up or down. And if you're underwater, then that's how you drown. All right. Good night, guys. Even though it's freaking 8:41 in the morning.